For those tuning into this video, my name's Arjun. I'm the head of research at InvestorKit, and I'm joined by a dear friend and valued client of ours, Michael. And today we're just going to be going into Michael's journey from when it comes to property investing, why property investing, as well as working with us and the journey to date and where he's headed to next. So, mate, Michael, thanks for joining the session here, mate, and really appreciate you giving us some of your time.
My pleasure. It's the least I can do as a thanks for everything that you've done for me.
Mate, Michael, let's go back to when it first started. And I think even just before working with us, just the whole idea of, you coming to a position of having, a considerably strong financial position and now going, hold on a minute, I'm going to transition this into property investing. Why? And what was the kind of big driver behind it all?
I think I'd have to think back to have an educated guess. I think what encouraged me to move into property was what encourages probably a lot of people, and that would be very loosely financial freedom. At the time, I was working a job, and although I was getting paid considerably well, I had recognized that I couldn't see myself working for someone else, at least for the rest of my life. I was only 26 or 7 at the time. And I had a goal to not be anchored to any particular position or job that I didn't want to do when I was 35, 40, or whenever it was that I decided to have kids. And so I saw property as a vehicle to be able to allow me to achieve that. And that just came down to preference. I realized that there are other investment assets that you can utilize to get there. For me, it just came down to comfort. And I think that when you're investing, particularly with large amounts of money, you want to invest in something that you are comfortable with. And so, although I've had friends that chose to invest in other assets such as stocks and those types of things, it just wasn't something that sat well with me. So I decided that property could be something that's useful. I chose to commit to, I think it was 6 months worth of passive education at the time. And that's how I stumbled across you in discovering the podcast that you feature on.
Now, mate, as soon as you got into property investing, when we connected, you had already owned an investment property and you were looking to scale the portfolio further. But what hits me most is that you were scaling the portfolio in the midst of a pandemic, dude. Like the pandemic's going on, the world's going crazy. What made you just go, nah, I'm doing this?
Yeah, sorry, you corrected me. It's so long, everything blurs into one. So yeah, I had purchased one property prior. So what encouraged me to purchase despite a pandemic going on was a couple of things. I'd say the first thing was that when you look at the people that have been most successful, I'll use Warren Buffett as an example. Multi-billionaire. He's got a famous quote, and I'll butcher it, but it's effectively be greedy when other people are fearful and I guess cautious when everyone else is in that FOMO stage. And so everyone around me was basically saying not to do it. But logically, it seemed to me like it would be a great time to buy because there wasn't a huge amount of pressure on that market. And so I thought, worst case scenario, I'll buy an asset that I'll have to hang on to for a little bit of time and eventually find it to be profitable. Best case scenario is I buy at a time that's, I guess, undervalued, and it will prove to kind of accelerate my progress. And so that's what I did. I'm naturally quite risk averse. And so I had to turn off a lot of the noise. I had to stop listening to the media, stop talking to people. The more people that you speak to, it's kind of the more negative responses that you can get about what's actually going on. So I turned all of that stuff off, and I just thought quietly to myself about I guess, as I just said, the best and worst case scenarios. And I thought that worst case scenario didn't even seem that bad. So I just launched myself into it.
Well, speaking of launching into it, we'd worked together on 3 purchases together during the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Actually, not even a couple of years. I think it's like,
it's
been quick. And those purchases, I look back at it now and realized, holy crap, you've experienced a bit of everything. You've experienced capital city, regional city.
Yeah.
You've experienced off market and on market. And then you've experienced a highly competitive, dozens of people at open home sale to a divorced and deceased estate sale. So looking back at this all, you've been as conditioned as possible when it comes to multiple experiences, all whilst a pandemic. Looking back at that journey of the properties, how do you think of the moment where you looked beyond, deal by deal and kind of thinking of a portfolio? Because at the time you could have just been happy with just one of these purchases, but then you went on to think of a portfolio behind that. When did that really start kicking in for you?
I would think that I believe I chose an arbitrary, nonsensical number of wanting 10 properties for no apparent reason. It was just a number that I chose. And so I decided to move towards that. And I think since then I've somewhat reevaluated. But what can be important is if you choose a goal that seems positive in nature and you move towards it, even if you don't get there or you decide to alter the path that you've chosen, you'll end up taking a positive step forward. And that was the effect that I found. So to recap, I decided, or I'd thought that I wanted 10 properties. I don't know that that's necessarily the case for me right now, but in at least applying myself to that goal, I ended up collecting a few more on the way. And so I'm very glad that I made that decision. I don't know if that properly answers what it was you were asking.
No, it makes sense there, man. And on the whole journey of working with us versus the plethora of buyers agents out there, what made you feel comfortable in working with us?
I would say that whether I'm right or wrong, I think that I've got a pretty decent judge of character. And so maybe this isn't advisable to other people, but once I met you and I had created some assumptions that I believe have turned out to be true about your quality of character, I just launched myself into it. And I don't know if you realize or remember this, but there was a time, one of the properties, I think it was Hallett Cove in Adelaide, you sent me the link. I was busy and I didn't even look at the ad. I opened it. It took a little bit too long to load. And I just said, just book it, just buy it.
Yeah.
And then you did everything for me. I didn't look at anything. I just said, look, I trust Arjun. I know that he wouldn't launch me into a property that he didn't believe in himself. And being a very busy person that I was, and I guess I somewhat still am, that was the most convenient approach for me. And one other thing as well is that because I'm quite risk averse by nature, it's kind of a strategy that I've utilized to avoid becoming paralyzed by an excessive amount of analysis, because I am someone that if I choose to think about it, I will become completely stagnant and I won't move at all. And so again, I thought about it, worst case scenario, I buy a property that Arjun believes in long term. That's not an actual bad case to be in. Do I trust Arjun? Yes. Does he have proven track record? Yes. Is he successful himself as well? Yes. Like there was just so many ticks to the boxes. So I ended up just deciding, stop thinking about it, turn off the noise, listen to Arjun, it'll work out. And that's pretty much been the case. It's worked out really well for me.
Well, I mean, on that note, from a trust perspective, I think we were celebrating a few months afterwards that I'd actually bought in the same suburb of Hallett Cove with you.
Yeah, correct.
And the other thing was one of your other properties we purchased in Central Coast in Sydney. I purchased literally like maybe a couple roads down in the next door suburb from you as well. So when you think of the journey, imagine a journey like without us. And I know it's hard to say, but and I know you're a really motivated person as well, because to get to your financial strength of where you are today and what you've achieved in property, that obviously takes a level of action taking. So I'm not going to say that you wouldn't have taken action, but where do you think you would have landed without us and then versus with us?
I wouldn't have done it. I just wouldn't have done it. For me, I can only speak for me personally, but I like to become extremely focused on what it is that I'm good at. So for those that don't know, you might also not care, but for what it's worth, I buy and sell cars, and I consider myself to be one of the best in Australia at doing that. And likewise, or similarly, I think that you're probably one of the best in Australia at buying houses. And so I thought if Arjun was up against me and trying to buy a car that I wanted to buy, there's no chance. I'm just too good compared to your skill set within my industry. And so I assumed that vice versa, it would be the exact same. If I tried to compete against the likes of you and other talented buyers, I just wouldn't be able to produce the result that I wanted to produce. So it became quite a logical decision for me that that would be the best case scenario, in utilizing someone with a professional understanding of the industry that I want to be involved with. To elaborate on that a little bit further, I think because of the busyness of my world, I wouldn't have been able to maintain the success that I was seeing in my career while maintaining or commencing some kind of success in the property world. I just don't know that it's possible to do both. Like if you look at a professional athlete, if you told them to do both sports at the same time, they wouldn't be able to do it, even if they were good at both. To be excellent, you really have to focus on the one thing. And so I just simply don't think I would have been able to succeed in. I either would have fallen backwards terribly in my career, and tried to make up years of experience that you have in a short amount of time and probably failed, or choose to do what I ended up doing, which was maintain the success that I was seeing and utilize the experience that you have. So that's kind of how I thought about it.
Well, you know, I actually go on and use that example when telling my friends why I'm not in the NBA. I tell them, hey, look,
that's the only reason.
The family wanted me to play cricket. I wanted to play basketball. I was stuck in the middle. So I thought, why not just not excel at both? And then that was my reasoning there as well, man. But no, look, I commend you with you know, the action that you've taken and what we've done there. And but I guess, you know, when you look at the transition now you've made as well from working in a job to running your own business and what you do, when it comes to building a team around you, you know, I sometimes sit back and I go, hey, there's all these clients like yourself with strong financial positions, who through leveraging teams and growing a business can set the time aside if they really, really wanted to. Yet many times over, you choose to go, no, professional fee, 3 times with me. Many more ahead from the journey we continue to plan. What makes you look back and go from a sense of a, you know, confidence in doing that and a comfort of doing that versus stepping back and going, I'll just learn the crap out of this myself and try it?
Well, you can't. Like, you know, so at the time when I was working that job, I don't know if you're okay with me sharing numbers. I don't care what I was making at the time.
Man, go for it, dude. Go for it.
So I made that financial year, I think I made 900 grand from a PAYG. Now, if I tried to learn, to kind of recount what I was saying before, if I tried to learn what you were doing, that might have dropped to 450. Like it's literally impossible to try to learn something while you're excelling at something else. Like I was already putting 80 hours a week into my career. And so I can't extract 20 hours that don't exist. My life was completely full at the time. So again, I can only speak for people in a similar situation to myself. If you don't have a huge amount of time, especially if you're not studious, because that's what it will require, you will not be able to compete against a professional. If I break my toilet, I don't try to figure it out myself and compete against someone that's got 4 to 6 years experience, especially when we're considering the drastic variance in performance that could come as a consequence of not making the right decision. So I guess an example of, I don't know the actual mass, which doesn't really help me explain this, but say that, just to use an easy number, say a fee was $10,000 and a property was $500,000. It would be the tiniest amount of percent improvement over, say, 10-year period for you to already be in front. So that's kind of how I looked at it. It seems like a large amount of money up front, but the professional only has to beat your pick without their help by, it'd be hardly anything. It might be a percent over the course of 10 years for that to be a worthwhile investment. So the numbers just added up. Like there's simply no argument against it. Again, I guess the alternative is that you can try to learn and outperform a professional, but it's just probably not going to happen. You're already trying to run your own life. Most people have some kind of commitments and responsibilities and a career that they're applying themselves to. So tell me how someone, whether it's me or someone else, doesn't matter how smart you are, how they're supposed to compete against someone that's devoting, I don't know, like you work 70, 80 hours a week. How can you compete against that? You can't. At least that's my belief anyway.
Yeah, it's a very like, sports way also to look at it. Like, it kind of reminds me of the Kobe Bryant days, right? He used to say, hey, our typical NBA player works out 9 to 11, rests, goes back 4 to 6 p.m. Where he goes, hey, if I just wake up at 3 a.m. and I do 4 to 6 a.m., rest, have brekkie while everyone's still sleeping, and then go back 9 to 11, then again 4 to 6. That's 1 hour, one extra training session a day, 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year. And it compounds to a level that even if I take a year off, you'll still never catch up.
Exactly.
So like, it's a very, very similar point to that. I mean, on this journey, then, we've obviously started building it up. And if you're okay, I mean, I've got some of the results that we were talking about. And, when we were talking about the results, there was $450,000, or just over $450,000 of gained equity in the last 12 to 15 months. There might be, business owners out there who are considering, okay, I'm in a position to purchase multiple versus just the one at a time and kind of see things how they grow. If you've done that across one at a time, see things how they grow and take it to many years, that might not have seen that same $500,000 worth of gain in such a short time. What was the kind of moment that after your first one, you said to yourself, okay, hey, to any other business owners out there, this is what I kind of said to myself when it came to getting the second and third in such short amount of time, and then kind of, seeing that growth?
So are you asking me, like, what made me not stop and think about, not stop and watching the growth before I jumped into my next one? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, because see, we didn't actually get the results until later.
Right.
That's the thing with property investing. But yet you said, no, I want to go multiple times over and over again immediately.
So I guess, again, I was trying not to think too much about it. I thought that historically speaking, property tends to go up. I'm not as much of a property nut as some people. Like, some people really think it's the best thing in the world. I think that property is great, but I do think there are other things that are great as well. But it was what I chose to do. And so when I choose something, I commit to it. And so I thought, if I'm going to commit to this thing and I've got the capacity to purchase in a somewhat conservative manner where I feel protected and comfortable, then I can do it. So I was able to do this because at the time I was living at home. Even once I did move out, my expenses were very low. And so I understood my worst case scenario. And that was that in a worst case scenario, I'm still making a heavy amount of money and I'll be okay. So just have a crack. And again, when you've got professional support that you believe in and trust, everything becomes a lot easier. So that's what it came down to more than anything else. I wasn't thinking about it because I felt comfortable. You can always think of a reason as to why you shouldn't be doing something. You can create scenarios in your head and write yourself a bad story so you don't do something. That's easy to do. You can do it all the time, no matter how good things are. But the foundation was that I was working with a team that I trusted. I was making good income, which I was very fortunate to be able to do. And so I thought, if everything gets, I remember this now. I thought that if everything gets that bad, that property absolutely tanks, I'm going to be screwed anyway. So I might as well do it. And when you kind of understand the macroeconomic climate of Australia, not that I really do, but I've got some sense, and how tightly linked in property is to like superannuation and the broader economy, you start to get a sense that property does need to work for Australia to function. And so that provided me some sense as well. Some sense of comfort as well.
I've actually haven't, that's the first time I've thought about it in that way. Like, it's like, hey, if I do this, it'll work out well. And if I do this and I get screwed over, it's just as bad as if I don't do it and get screwed over. Because, it's a fair point you raise. Like, I remember back to back to a point where I did a research review on Bank of America versus CBA's earnings.
Right.
And I reviewed their net interest margins, which is essentially the margins in between money out and money in, and that's the core income from lending.
Yep.
And CBA at the time I reviewed it had 74% of its earnings come from net interest margin, and Bank of America was closer to 52%.
Right.
Well, that's a huge difference. It's like, hey,
Yeah.
we are home lending, through and thin, like everything, that's us. And then the other one's like, yeah, we do a bit of home lending and we do a bit of other stuff. And then you break it down to construction jobs, money in people's accounts to, I guess, feel good about their finances and buy cars and other things like, your industry. It's all kind of somewhat linked. So it's a fair call to go, hey, if all hell breaks loose, if I'm not in it, I'm screwed. And if I'm in it, I'm screwed. So why not just look for the upside?
Yeah, exactly. Like if the world really collapsed to the point where nothing was worth anything, you're not really in a better situation because you didn't purchase. Everything's going to be awful anyway. And so that's kind of a comforting thought that I reminded myself of, that if everything does half, the economy will be absolutely just destroyed. And I know that the government, with the amount of money that revolves around property, would do as much as they could to protect that. Whether or not you think that's right or wrong, that's a separate conversation, but that is what I believe to be the case.
Yeah, great analysis. Mate, the last one I have for you today is that, when you think of others who might be on this journey and they're thinking of whether they engage a buyer's agency like InvestorKit or not, or whether they're starting their first portfolio or adding more to it, just reflecting on the journey that you've been on and that you're still on, because every time we catch up, I feel like we're talking about the current or the next, one or the other.
Right.
What tips do you have for others who are on this journey? I mean, you've had an explosion of wealth creation. You've purchased three properties, gained $500,000 of wealth in assets. Rents have gone up as well. So you've done things well. What are your thoughts here on tips for others?
So I'm very particular about my word, right? Which is something you said you appreciate. So I can only speak to people that are in a similar situation to myself. I can't speak to someone that's struggling to get their money together on a week-to-week basis. I can speak to people that are in a strong financial position and that value their time. And time, to me, is extremely important. And so if I can utilize someone else's strengths, as I've previously said, and save myself time in doing so, and stress is a big one. I'm trying to remove as much stress and problem solving out of my life as possible. I do enough of that as it is. Then it's a no-brainer to utilize someone else's expertise, especially when you start to, and I kind of mentioned this, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but what I've kind of said before is, if you're good at what you do, right, you can recognize how much better you are than someone else that has no experience. So as I said before, buying cars, easy for me. I bought probably over 5,000 cars now. If I went up against someone, which I do on a daily basis, private buyers that are trying to buy against me, unless they blatantly beat me on price, I beat them on speed every single time, because I'm looking at the market all the time, 7 days a week. And so I buy cars before people even know they hit the market, and they've already been pulled back down. And I know that that's the case for you guys as well. Other people are out there trying to live their lives, and they're distracted, I guess, by the responsibilities that exist. And so they can't compete with someone else that has so much attention to the market the way that you guys do. And so I guess that's what I would encourage. If you are good at what it is that you do, you have to imagine that the advantage that you have over your competitors is the same advantage that Arjun and the rest of your team would have over someone else that's looking at doing it themselves. It really just becomes such an obvious answer for me.
Yeah. Well, mate, thank you for your time today and all the success that you're having on your wealth building journey as well. I'm very humbled to have you as a mate, and also a great client of ours. If you are, considering the next phase of your portfolio here and you're looking to start it or scale it, you can reach out to the team at investorkit.com.au. And yeah, that's it from us. Thank you again, Michael.
Thanks so much.
See ya.